Welcome to Status Dramaticus. On today's episode, we're going to be interviewing Nurse B. On this show, we pull back the curtain to show you just what's going on at the bedside with nursing. We're joined today by Nurse B. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
So, Nurse B is a brand new nurse. You've been in the field for about 2 years now?
Yeah, 2 years.
Excellent. And what did you do before nursing?
So I went straight into nursing. I actually knew I wanted to be a nurse since I was little. I have a picture of me, like literally in not fifth grade. I was 5 years old, dressed in a little nurse's outfit. So after I graduated high school, I went straight to college and went straight into nursing school. So I just knew nursing was for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you have any nurses in the family?
No, so I'm the first to, go into higher level of education, so college, and then the first in the medical field. So everyone thinks I'm a doctor, but I'm not. I'm a nurse.
We still ask you all the medical questions, right?
Absolutely.
When people ask me, like, oh, the special occasions, like, a doctor, I go, no, I work for them.
No. They're like, can I take this medication with? I was like, I have no idea what that medication does, so I'm not going to answer.
Right. Ask your doctor. Is there like a time you remember, like something you saw that was like, oh, did you want to be a nurse?
I just think like I was exposed to a lot of crazy things that I saw at a very young age. And so craziest thing, I remember in high school, it was like the first incident. I was in English class or something, and I was sitting next to this girl, and all of a sudden she has a seizure. Like literally we're reading our book and she just like looks up, rolls her eyes back, and just like falls onto me and starts seizing. And I've had so many episodes throughout my life seeing these medical emergencies, and I always like felt the urge to step in. Like I always felt comfortable, just like, what's going on? How can I help? And so I felt like it was really natural to be in a nursing role. I did consider medical school. I did do the whole application and everything. I just felt that being a doctor wasn't going to be as satisfying as being a nurse, shockingly enough. But
yeah. And you probably sidestepped $500,000 in debt. So
yes, so I am debt free. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's definitely helpful. So now let me ask you this: when you were starting school and kind of doing your clinicals, you graduated right into the pandemic, correct?
I did, yeah.
Is nursing like what you thought it was going to be? Is it different from what you thought? Like, how has it changed, and what's your view on that?
Yeah, so I think the nursing class of 2020 was the last class who got to do clinicals before everything changed, because bedside is not the way it was. So I had a really good clinical experience. My practicum was in the multi-system ICU. So that was January to April of 2020. And literally COVID was rolling in and we had no idea that it was COVID yet. So I'm grateful that I got to see what nursing was actually like. And don't get me wrong, there was already problems with it before, but I feel like being literally all I know is pandemic nursing, getting hired in 2020, working in those conditions, working with intense COVID patients, and then now transitioning to more calmer times. But what is bedside now with staffing and resources and just hospital policies, I think it's a lot more different than what nursing school kind of makes it seem.
Yeah.
And I really like to use my platforms to kind of showcase what it's really like out there, because I would hate for our future nurses to be blindsided almost to what working, especially most people go into bedside. So what working bedside really is like right now.
Speaking of which, you're Generation Z, right?
I don't know. I'm in the middle somewhere.
Well, compared to me, you're a wizard. Yeah, you kind of grew up with that, and you mentioned your platforms, and you have quite a bit of following on like Instagram and a blog, correct? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in nursing school, I made my Instagram blog. It's called Coffee with Confidence, and I just made it as a creative outlet. I didn't have a huge support system in nursing school. Again, being the only one going through this, and I couldn't really relate to much. I was in a new city all alone. So I created a platform just to kind of talk about it and vent about school. And then people were like, hey, I like that too. And I guess my generation is so social media based. That's really how we make connections. So from there, it kind of has grown over the last couple of years. I think I have about 5,000 followers now, which is crazy to me. And yeah, so it's been interesting.
Have you gained any insights from like talking to all these different people kind of around the world or in all different states? You think you
Yeah,
learned from that, you think?
absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. As nurses, our licensing has been NCLEX and everyone takes it, but a lot of states aren't within the multi-state um, license registration. So it's interesting to hear from these other nurses from these places that aren't within that compact license group, just to hear like their nursing school journey, to hear how their hospital runs things, to hear hospitals with like unions, to hear hospitals who are nonprofit, profit, religious. Like it's crazy how different the hospital systems can be, even though healthcare is generally the same. So,
Yeah, I think as nurses, especially older nurses, um, they've worked for one institution. And then a lot of nurses you run into, they think like their institution and how they do things is kind of like how everyone does things, which
right.
can be vastly different system to
Hmm.
system.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool experiences I've had as a traveler is going from system to system, learning how things are done like differently and how some things are done better than other systems and how some things are done much worse. And like my hope for the future is that with all of these travel nurses going around the country, that we can kind of revamp nursing at the bedside with social media and take all the best practices from the systems and put together some new type of nursing workflow. Because right now, with everything that's placed upon us as nurses, in my opinion, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's when we first spoke, you talked about working with your hospital for like recruitment. You want to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that? I thought that was super cool.
Yeah. So with my organization, I mean, we talk about the shortage, right? And I always talk about like, I feel like I've gone to like all of my coworkers who have been nurses for 15, 10, 5, 7 years. And everyone I talk to, I always ask them like, did they talk about the nursing shortage while you were at school? And they all say yes. So I always think like, I always was realistic when I went to nursing school and I was like, I knew it was going to be tough. Like I knew I wasn't entering this profession for money because I wouldn't be a nurse if it was for the money. But I just knew that, the shortage, it's not something I think we'll ever be able to fix. That's just my personal opinion. But going through recruitment is finding, nurses that kind of meet our culture and can help us, like you're talking about, like finding those people who can work in these certain conditions. Because I work in a very high stress level environment, being like a trauma center. So we need people who can work in those kind of environments. So I've gone out to mostly nursing schools, and I've spoken with these students and talking about the transition from student nurse to registered nurse, because that's not something that we have. Like it's literally just a jump. Like you're like, oh yay, I graduated, passed my NCLEX, and then they're like, okay, all of a sudden patient care is on your hands. It's your license. Good luck.
Let's
And I'm
go.
like, that's so unfair. Like, dude, I don't even know what I'm doing yet. Let's calm it down a little bit. So that's what I was doing with recruitment efforts, kind of helping that disconnect. And I've gotten really good feedback from it. So I thought it was really cool for my organization to kind of implement that.
That's great. That's great to hear. So yeah, there's light, hopefully light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not sure how long because we were in a shortage before the pandemic, right?
Right.
Shortage and pandemic exacerbated that. How we attract more people to nursing is going to be a question. And
Hmm.
realistically, it's like, I think there's a statistic that we mentioned on the show, upwards of 50% after the first year leave the bedside and go and do
Yeah.
something else.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's like the idea, and maybe, did you hear this kind of in nursing school too? Like, oh, continue your education. And like, they don't talk about like how to be it's okay just to be a bedside nurse for your entire career. We actually need
Yeah.
competent, good bedside nurses that have been there for like 10, 15, 20 years.
Hmm.
Um, I know maybe 3 nurses that have been a bedside nurse for like their whole career. And
Wow.
that's a hard position to do for 30 years. But you start after you get past like 5 years working at the bedside, you really see a lot and you're like experience level kind of jumps to different
Yeah.
level. I know my new job where I'm working with a lot of younger nurses right now, just graduated, and it's hard to see like the stress level that they go through as they learn new things. So I really try to take time to with them and be like, you know, help them think through problems, help them understand like you can't be at like stress level 9 all the time for certain situations, and you have to learn like how to cope and not take everything home with you. And it's a lot of work, that's for sure. And as for drawing new nurses in, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think starting with a pay increase would definitely help.
Booyah.
You know, I'm excited about the energy that has been brought to the nursing community by all of us going through this and the march that we're both going to be going to. So do you want to tell me a little bit like why you decided you want to go to the march?
I just felt empowered, like by seeing all these nurses from literally around the nation, to hear them have same issues, worse issues, and really want to come back to like nursing 101. And I think that's what we all want. Like, I really think, like, I always say when we have these conversations, because I'm open and I have conversations with my leadership, my coworkers, like I'm up and honest. And I say, you know, we always talk about pay, but like money can only go so far, you know, like, yeah, you can pay me so much money, but like if the conditions are still rough, I'm still going to burn out. I just get to take home more money. So hearing people wanting to fix something more than just money was what really called out to me. Because that's why I went into nursing. I went into nursing because I cared for people. We froze here for a second. Sorry, we froze a little bit. But I went in because I care for people. I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. I wanted to be knowledgeable in the medical world. And like, we can't do that anymore, I feel like. So I'm all for mandated ratios. I'm all for safety for not only patients, but for nurses. I'm all for, fair, equal pay. We go through a lot. I mean, if you're asking me to do 12 different jobs, I would hope you can compensate me for at least doing 10 of those. Like, I'm not asking for much. I know there's a bunch of people. And the thing is, it's also interesting, you know, hearing in all these posts and all these conversations, how everyone is so far on the spectrum. So I'm very curious to see like how this is all going to come together. Because right now it's kind of crazy how distant like the spectrum is and everyone on it, which was shocking to me, to see so many people being like, money's the only answer. You got to pay me and I'll shut up. Or like, it's just the basics. Like, we don't have to do it this way. It's fine. I'm like, so where are we? I feel like I'm in the middle.
Right.
So
I view it as like, I describe it as a scale. So if it were like a sliding scale, when conditions are really kind of bad and you have no staff and you're 6, 7 patients and no aides, that scale moves maybe towards the left, towards like higher pay. Because if I have to go into these conditions, I need to make premium pay. But I realize that's not really sustainable. And I don't really like working in those conditions. I don't really get to be a nurse that I want to be. Moving that scale back towards where we have, you know, patient techs, maybe proper staffing, or just more support, then you can slide that pay scale down for me. You know, I don't need a premium pay to go into a condition, into a place like that, especially where I can take my new contract, all the resources in the world, and it's amazing. And I can actually sit and talk to my patients and do social work consults and talk about like what's going to happen when they leave the hospital, what their game plan is, and you feel like you can actually be a nurse again instead of other places where I'm just running into rooms and, you know, throwing pills into people's mouths and answering calls, stopping people from falling out of the bed. Nurses, like you said, most of us didn't get into this field for the money. But we do want to be compensated fairly, and we do want to work in safe conditions. I think my personal opinion, national patient to nurse ratios is a great idea, but I don't know if it's achievable, to be honest, especially when there's a nursing shortage. If we don't have enough nurses right now, mandating hospitals to have these patient ratios might be unrealistic. And then what is the mechanism to enforce those ratios? Is it like fines? Would it be? Um, is it strike? I'm not really sure. Where I'm working right now is probably one of the best examples that I've seen of a large kind of corporate structure that has quite a bit of money. But on top of that, this place has a very strong union that's been there for about 45 years. So they already have like really, really good patient ratios. So I think as like hospital systems become more corporate, which is fine because it improves efficiencies and it helps, with costs. There needs to probably be a national nurses union to counterbalance that.
Yeah.
So you can have nurses' rights, workers' rights, what we're really talking about here is safe working conditions for phlebotomists, for nurses, and things like that. And when there's not a union to kind of stand up against these like corporate entities, nurses and everyone else kind of gets pushed aside.
Yeah, I want to touch so my personal opinion when it comes to this is I totally agree. I think a national mandated patient ratio should exist. It's literally evidence-based practice, which is what we study, which is what every doctor studies. Everyone in a science field goes by evidence-based practice. We literally have over 10 years of this stuff telling us what is safe patient ratio. So why shouldn't this be mandated? I feel like that's a long-term goal, in my opinion. With right now, what I think we need to be doing is, having that mandate enacted, but then also holding hospitals, holding units, holding everyone accountable. So let's say, the mandate now for a ICU is 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, right? Or let's do a med surg, just make that easier. So let's say a med surg ratio is 5. That's what the evidence shows. 4 to 5. And I come to work and you're giving me 6 or 7. If I'm working in those conditions, you need to protect me. This doesn't fall on me anymore. And I feel like that's where a lot of people would be more comfortable working in these current conditions. Because it's not like magic. We're just oh, here are mandated ratios, not everyone can be happy. That's not going to happen. Let's be realistic about this. It's there, it's in place, it should be enforced. But if you can't do it, then you need to protect me. Then if anything happens, the liability can't fall on me because you're not following what's proposed, what is mandated. I'm working in those conditions that you can't commit to. So it's your liability, not mine. So that's my personal opinion. I am new to this. I don't know about unions. I'm always up for listening to all these great ideas and how things are working. And especially I have friends who come from union hospitals and tell me how things work there. I think just like you say, the basics, I think the basics do need to be something mandated national wise. Does that have to be a union? I don't think so. I think it can just be mandated safe ratios, mandated safetiness just in general for nurses. How we report, our reporting system, I feel is broken almost. You hear all these crazy stories about nurses and then the culture makes it seem oh, but you're a nurse. I've had a patient tell me that, oh, but it's your job. I'm my contract does not say, oh, I get to get verbally abused twice a day and physically assaulted once a week.
Right.
No. So those are things that need to be enacted. I just feel the way we can pull nurses is to make nursing safe again.
Yeah.
Honestly, if people see that, hey, it's tough out here. That's why you're coming into this. It's not easy peasy. You're saving people's lives, but we're here to protect you. Why not? Why not give it a go?
Yeah.
So that's how I see it.
You hit the nail on the head, and you're talking about basically how every nurse kind of is feeling right now.
Yeah.
They don't feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why you're seeing these marches happen, nurses leaving in droves. Because before, corporate medicine talk to good talk where, we care about you, we have your back, you're a nurse, yada, yada, yada. But when this pandemic hit, should we wear a mask, don't wear a mask?
Yeah.
I literally heard people say, well, don't scare the patients.
Yeah.
What about my life, what about
right.
And then people leave and you get dumped on. And now it's almost as a feeling as we just don't want to talk about what happened. We want to just go back to business as usual with no staff. I've
Yeah.
heard one of my friends who used to work in it, like kind of the administration side, the corporate side. His fear to me that he has said, if they can make the clinical side work, meaning like nursing care at the bedside work with giving nurses 6 or 7 patients, why would they ever go back to giving them 3 or 4?
Yeah, that's my fear.
Yeah. They can talk about safety and good outcome, but if something bad happens, you can just literally blame it on that nurse. What I've seen with union hospitals is what you're talking about, where you get to say, when they're working outside of their contracted matrix, like if their union contract says they're supposed to have 4 patients and they're at 5 or 6, they sign a piece of paper saying if something happens, this doesn't go on my license because we're outside our contract.
Okay.
That's a great mechanism. Now, I'm not sure how like that holds up in court or whatever, but that goes to exactly what you're talking about. In nationwide mandates, if you could sign a piece of paper like that, that would go a long ways.
But I do want to say that things are different. So we also have to take into consideration that people were isolated for almost 2 years of their lives.
Yeah.
And especially in like a field I work, because I work in oncology now, people got sicker. So people are coming in after delays of treatment plans. So now what would have been a med-surg patient to you maybe years ago when you started, which was truly a walkie-talkie, I'm here for some tummy pain, is now a patient with GI bleed, and is in a med-surg unit. Like, it's so different now. I feel like even the consideration of what a patient can clinically be leveled at has to be changed, because I get patients and I'm like, shouldn't you be in the ICU? Because I feel like an ICU nurse right now. And I think that's also something that we're not considering. We're not considering how the acuity of patients and their illnesses has elevated, especially with COVID.
That's a really, really valid point. People are just sicker because they're afraid to go to the hospital. They're afraid to go out. And so just the basic med-surg patient is like probably a step-down patient, if not ICU patient, like you were saying. We're all over the place right now.
I'm nervous about that.
Yeah.
I really agree with that. This is like the time to speak. 2 years ago, everyone was cheering for us outside of their doors.
I remember that.
Yeah, like, woo! And now I'm like, excuse me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I got it. It's Nurses Week. Happy Nurses Week this week. But I am nervous for that. I do agree that we finally have the opportunity to have a platform to be heard. I just feel like a lot of different opinions are wanting to be shared. And I think we just got to be realistic with it.
Yeah.
Is healthcare going to be perfect? No, because why? We are humans. We're running a system. We're not robots. If robots were running it, sure. But we're humans caring for humans. Yep. And that's what I think we really have to, not only healthcare individuals, but the patients too. Like, I hate the term superhero for nurses.
Oh, I know.
I hate it. I think it's so dangerous.
It is.
Because I have patients who like see me in a light where I can be in 2 patients' room at once, and I can cure them. I can take away their pain. And I'm realistic with my patient care. We set goals off the bat. Some people like it, some people don't. I have to do what I can do, but I'm not a miracle worker. And I think that's what I would like to take away from labeling nurses as heroes.
That's such a good point. So many nurses internalize that too, where they don't take breaks. They don't drink water. Like,
I didn't drink water.
I see a new nurse, I'm like, do you take a break? No. You need to form the habit of taking a break.
Yeah.
You have to step outside of patient care for at least 30 minutes. Yep. Give a report, get off the unit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's I think a big thing that my generation of nurses, so again, like I said, social media influences us a lot. And I don't love social media all the time. It's very fake sometimes. It's very exaggerated sometimes. Even with like this march wanting to happen, and I was hearing these stories, I was like, is this real? But like, you see every spectrum of generations of nurses talking about the same thing year after year after year. So like that's how I know there's an actual issue. But I think my generation of nurses are more scared. I know like my parents like generation, like working, they were loyal to a company because they gave them a job. Like they were loyal no matter pay, no matter benefits. Like you granted me an opportunity, I'm going to stay loyal to you. And my generation doesn't work like that. Our loyalty lies to ourselves, which is something I'm really happy because it's sad to see, but I see so many baby nurses like just go up and leave 6 months in. I'm not happy. Bye. Like, you know, is there an extreme to everything? Yes. But I do think this new generation of nurses, like being able to easily just tell leadership straight up, like, I'm not happy here. You're not sufficing me. I'm going somewhere where I can find my happiness is such a powerful move. And I don't know if leadership, like future leadership, is going to be able to combat that or handle that.
They're so used to nurses just putting up and shutting up. You know, they'll complain, they'll bitch a little bit like on their units and talk about it, but no, they don't really do anything or enact any change. And, you know, I think a lot of times people try it first, they don't get anywhere with it, and then they kind of give up. I think they like that's kind of the spectrum. But like enacting change isn't easy, and it's a process. And someone mentioned to me that when bedside nurses kind of like talk to leadership, it's such a high like pressure emotional job that when something is wrong and it's endangering your license and your patients, that it's hard to bring yourself back down to have like kind of like a boardroom level conversation. Because if you walk into people that are going to like, you know, administration or whatever, and you're talking to corporate and you want to tell them how like something needs to change, if you're off rip just like accusing them or kind of yelling, that conversation is going nowhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a productive conversation. So like nurses learning how to communicate a little bit better with kind of the corporate structure is super important in my opinion, because we realistically, and I got into this in one of my earlier episodes, even though we're both speaking like English, we're speaking two different languages. So nurses will talk in like clinical talk, and that doesn't translate up to a person who doesn't work in the clinical setting, and they're talking in like business jargon, right? And so trying to bridge that gap sometimes, and getting to a place where there's a common understanding about what the problem is, I think is a big problem in healthcare in general. Because you kind of have business people and you have clinical people, and then bridging that gap can be really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. I'm learning that. That's something I'm learning. I've always been a vocal person, and I like cry, and I literally cry to leadership. Thankfully, I have a pretty good leadership team that I can talk to, you know, about these things, and I feel heard. I know it's very rare for a lot of people, and that's one of the main reasons why I picked where I work. And I hope everyone can find that. But like you said, like even having those conversations, I find myself not being understood as much as I wanted to. And I look back and I'm like, I don't understand like what went wrong. Like in my world, it makes sense, but in their world, they're like, you said A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And yeah, that's why I'm excited to see who is going to be speaking for the nursing, like as a whole, like who is going to be the voice. Because I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen who that person is going to be, or what organization that's going to be. So that is going to be, because even now as nurses, because we're trying to move up this ladder, you know, we tried within leadership, we tried within corporation organizations, and now we're trying to get into a whole national political level.
Yeah, it's a new ball.
Nursing talk is not the same as political talk.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
In that level, that is where change really happens. And, you know, we can do it through voting, but realistically, like in the American system, laws aren't really influenced through voting, but they're influenced through lobbying. And nurses don't have like a national bedside nursing lobbying. You know, we have the hospital association, but that's for administration. That's like the hospital group is for
funding and stuff like that.
You know, it's not talking about the issues at the bedside. It's not talking about patient-nurse violence. It's not talking about safe ratios. So when you don't have someone that is lobbying for your concerns, we don't have a seat at the table. Realistically, we, as bedside nurses, we don't have a seat at the table. And I heard, and it could have just been a rumor, that is the goal of one of the organizers for the Nurses March, is to set up a lobbying firm. And I think that is definitely one step that is needed. Because that then gives us a seat at the table for national like lawmaking and conversations.
Absolutely.
You know, you think about it, like that's where the people who make their laws, that's where they get their information from. So when we get upset that like, well, this doesn't reflect anything for us, we don't have a seat. So the only people we should be upset with is ourselves. And I think we're starting to, like, as nurses, realize this. And for a long time, in my opinion, we've kind of just, you know, I want to be a bedside nurse. That's my passion. That's what I want to do. And we've kind of fell asleep at the wheel. Now, no one's coming for us. We got to save ourselves. And I really think too, we have to find nurses that need to maintain their career at the bedside, but also double as like this advocate for lobbying and things like that. Because once you step outside of being a bedside nurse, like you lose the pulse of what's happening. You know, a lot of problems that you have down in Miami are the same problems I have in Michigan, because we're both bedside nurses. You know, nursing violence, ratio problems, staffing, things like that. That's kind of ubiquitous. But you need to be doing the job to understand the problems at hand, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think it's like the blind leading the blind when you have hospital administration talking to politicians about our problems. And then I've literally had moments where I see administration and, like, you know, rounding, and they're like, wait, I thought this was going on your unit. And I'm like, no, not at all. And they're like, well, that's what we've been told. I'm like, well, no. So it's just a huge disconnect. And I think the best thing we can do, and my like final opinion, is just getting us to the right place so we can speak. That's my biggest goal. Do I think anything's going to get signed this week? No. Do I think anything's going to change this week? Honestly, probably not. Do I think people are going to be more empowered? Yes. But I do think if we play this right, we can get ourselves into a place in government. We can get ourselves into that lobbying platform. We can get ourselves nurses into administration. That's my goal. I really want to go into leadership and administration. And like you said, like a lot of people, once they leave bedside, they lose that touch. And I don't want to lose that touch. Like I want to be in a place where I know what bedside nursing looks like and go immediately into some type of role where I can, you know, advocate for that, change that. And that's like a fairy tale goal, honestly.
It isn't. And right now with our current setup it's difficult, and you've probably seen it already, is like, why does this nurse that just left the bedside, like, why does she not remember what it's like? What happened? Why did she forget?
Right.
And nurses that like move up and become like directors of nursing and things like, or directors of floors, they kind of have to realize they have to balance like the needs of the system versus the needs of the nurses. And if you're too much on like the nurses side, suddenly you're not playing for the right team anymore, which is administration. And then that nurse can get walked out. So, and it's just like part of this corporate culture, which I really don't think has a place in healthcare. And me personally, that's my ultimate goal, is to kind of like get rid of this toxic corporate culture that comes from capitalism that's been placed over top of the healthcare system. And it's touching on your last point that you made. I don't think anything's going to change in the march too, but I don't think that's not the role of a march. The role of a march is to motivate, energize a base of passionate people. What happens after the march, like you were saying, is really going to tell the tale of like where we go and how we're going to save our profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts for us before we jump off here?
No, I just hope that whoever's listening is motivated by this, is inspired by this, and I hope we keep this conversation going. But I hope conversation turns into action at some point, because I am tired. Okay, I'm tired, and I'm only 2 years in. I'm like, I'm exhausted.
Something's got to happen, Jesus.
Yeah, I was like, something's got to happen before I go too.
Why don't you share with everyone like your socials again, and where they can get in contact with you and your blog?
Yeah. So Instagram, it's coffee with confidence underscore. There's only one. I have my email there too. You can DM me. I'm really good at responding. I'm open and honest on my platform. Again, I use it as a kind of a bridge to that younger generation of nurses, to really show them what bedside is like, and just be honest and real and inspire people in how to speak up. Because like you said, nurses learn to just work and shut up, but we have quite a few things to say. So
That's right. That's right. And I just want to thank everyone for listening. This was kind of like our before the March episode of like what we're hoping to see, and what we hope to see happen. We plan on doing another follow-up episode of after the March and give you guys kind of like the nitty gritty of what we saw down there. So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you for listening to Status Dramaticus, and talk to you soon. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Yay!